Welcome to Inside Startup Investing, the only podcast where you can invest in every guest. On this episode, I will be speaking with the co-founder and CEO of MoviePass, Stacy Spikes. As a reminder, if you like what you hear on today's episode, you can actually invest in MoviePass on WeFunder, regardless of whether or not you're accredited. If you're like me, you've heard the name MoviePass. You probably are saying to yourself, I know that name from somewhere, but where? And then it hits you. This company became a household name for a hot sec and a cultural phenomena back in the 2017 range when they notoriously launched a membership to see unlimited movies at the movie theater for just $10 a month. What ensued was a cultural phenomena, fraud, a massive collapse, and jail time for a couple of the key figures that had acquired the business in 2017. Wild. It's literally the stuff of movies. But the founder, Stacy Spikes, who was not involved in the business when things went sideways, decided to step in for a second act, buying the brand out of bankruptcy and having another go at it. As an investor, this is an interesting investment opportunity from my personal perspective for a number of reasons. First off, Stacy was able to buy the brand back for next to nothing. Regardless of all the wild things that went down with the business 8 or 9 years ago, the brand carries great consumer recognition and value still. You cannot underestimate the value of a known entity that people already have an affinity for. Brand recognition equals distribution and provides a platform on which to build a new audience of paid users. On these episodes, it always strikes me when I am talking with a founder that is completely committed to their vision. Stacy literally still goes to movies 3 times a week and lives and breathes all things movies all the time. Stacy already had his exit. He doesn't need to do this. He's doing it because he loves movies. He wants to build great things for the movie industry, and he knows what people like him want. Most importantly, he will stop at nothing to realize his grand visions. That's a guy I wouldn't bet against. Lastly, MoviePass is entering its 2.0 phase that recognizes an unlimited membership to the movie isn't enough to win. It's going to take a grander vision. That's where his gamification, think fantasy sports for movies, will likely play a role in taking MoviePass into the future. But I'll let him tell you more about what that looks like. I can't say I've seen another deal like this, and it makes for quite the story, that's for sure. So if you want to see the second act of MoviePass come to life, listen in and decide for yourself if now is the best time to invest in them on WeFunder. So let's turn it over to Stacy. Let's dive right in. MoviePass. I think a lot of people know of MoviePass, have heard of it. It certainly had its viral moment or moments. Tell me about the original founding. Give us a little bit of all that went down, maybe in a condensed version, and how it's reemerging now.
Well, so the idea, back in the like 2011 was when we launched. The rise of subscription models from Netflix to Pandora to you know, all these different ones. And one of the things we were saying, well, why isn't there a Netflix for movie theaters? Why isn't there a subscription all you can eat for that? And we knew that when you get into a subscription, it increases behavior. So we were trying to drive more attendance at theaters, and we were trying to get more butts and seats and reduce the friction of decision making. So if I already have a pass and I paid for it already, why don't I go take a risk on this movie versus let me read the reviews, it becomes, do you want to just dedicate your time rather than needing to make a decision? And so we ran a test, a double blind test with AMC theaters, and we found that we increased movie going by 111% on average per person. So if you went, 1 time a month, you doubled. If you went, 2 times a month, you went up to 4. And it was very powerful. So we took the average person who was paying about $140 into the system a year, went up to almost $400 when you included the incremental concessions. So it's like the goose that lays golden eggs over and over. And we had raised around $10 million, my co-founder and I, and we slugged it out for about 5 years. So we went from 2012 to 2017, and then we got a buy offer, and so there was an exit to a private equity group. They bought it, and there was a bit of a, when you do these acquisitions, there's like a transition period, and so one of their ideas was they wanted to drop the price. I was CEO before, so with the new CEO, they wanted to drop it from $30 a month to $10 a month. And we said, our data shows that's not really a sustainable price point, but if you're trying to do it as a promotion, 100,000 new subs to get, some revenue growth. Cool. So we thought it would take a few months to get there. We turned the price down to $10 a month, and we added 100,000 people in 48 hours. And
Wow.
it took off. And all of a sudden, we were adding 250,000 new subs every month. We were growing faster than Netflix had grown or anything had grown. And so I gave them a warning that the price point was not sustainable. And they said, well, this is great. We're growing so fast. We'll figure it out. And I said, no, no, there's no figuring it out. These people will not become profitable. You will not make money. So they raised around $250 million, and they felt that my co-founder and I were just disgruntled former founders, and not wanting to rain on their parade. They let us go, and they kicked us off the board. They fired us, and within about 6 to 9 months, they went bankrupt. And so what was worse, as they were going down to try and prevent money, they ended up doing some nefarious things like taking out the cancellation button. They turned off customer service and made it basically impossible to cancel. And those are no-nos, in case anybody wants to know that. And so they were hit with fraud charges, and the federal government sued them. They were indicted. And so long story short, then COVID happens. And as we emerged out of COVID, MoviePass went up for sale in 2022. And so I bought the company back for around $140,000 free and clear. And I relaunched it in 23. We had a profitable year. 2024 was a profitable year. And now we've got a big pivot that we're actually right on day 2 of launching now, which I'll tell you more about. But that's kind of the before and after and where we are now.
That's a pretty wild ride, and I can't imagine having been on it. Um,
Yeah.
so after you stepped away from MoviePass, and all of this goes down, and the opportunity to buy it back comes up, some people would just say, "Let bygones be bygones. Let me move on to the next thing." You decided to come back into the fold and continue to pursue this thing. What drives you, motivates you? Why did you want to buy this back? What are your aspirations in taking it back over?
Well, it's kind of like, if there's some historical precedents, I would say if you look at Steve Jobs and Apple, I think if you look at Michael Dell and Dell Computers, if you look at the founders of Skype, there's been a lot of times where the company got bought, or they changed senior management, and the company didn't fare better, and they often brought the original team back in. And so, MoviePass, on a $10 million investment, ended up being valued at nearly $500 million, and it was trading higher in value than any theater service. And we knew that the digitalization of services has been happening. So when you look at HBO and you look at home video and Blockbuster, Netflix was a digitalization of that category. When you looked at where you're really having the relationship through a mobile phone. When you looked at Spotify and Pandora, radio's free. Why would anybody have a subscription service? But yet you saw that wave happen. So we knew that there was a hole in the theatrical window, and so to continue down this path of pursuing it only made sense when you had something that was worth $500 million a few years before. It's a very known household brand at this point, and you're getting it for $140,000. Well, go take a shot. The universe just opened a portal for you. Why not take the shot? So it was more like why not than why. Right now we're 13 years in, or 14 years in on its original launch, and we're still trugging along.
So you take it over and you're taking another shot here now. Where are you all in terms of kind of re-rolling out the product? And you talked about some changes you're making to the business as well. Yeah, how are you thinking about this business model and evolving it forward?
So one of the things that we looked at in Q4 of last year, AMC and Regal. So 60% of theaters now have a version of MoviePass, right? But the difference is with MoviePass, you can go to any theater. With those theaters, you can only go to their theater. It only lets you go to their theater. So what a lot of the theaters are doing is, even if they're losing money on the tickets, they're offsetting it with food and beverage. We don't have food and beverage, so they can carry a full loss, and we can't carry a loss. We have to have a profitable business. So we wanted to find an alternative to what is our food and beverage. And so we did not want to get into the theater business, right? So either you got to go up and to the left and become a theater so you can get those same margins off of F&B with food and beverage, or you need to go to the right and you're looking at something that's social in nature or something that is gaming in nature that can draw people in and have retention that you don't have to pay a lot of money to get. So as we looked at social and we looked at gaming, what we really found a kinship with is the way daily fantasy sports and prediction markets really let fans engage in a totally different way. They're able to become part of the experience. They become part of the game, so to speak. And we realized no one had truly built out the FanDuel, DraftKings, or Poly market of the movie industry. And so our pivot, and we're launching it now, is Mogul. And so Mogul's the first basically fantasy market that allows you to be a studio head, the way with fantasy sports you are a manager of a team, and you are going to pick you get a salary cap, and you basically get to pick what movies in a season. So our season right now is the fall season, so it'll go from October through to January, so 12 weeks. In that season, you're going to take your salary cap and you're going to bet on movies performance, you're going to bet on actors and directors, and you start out with $1 million, and at the end of the season, who performed the best? And that's the winner of the season. So there'll be a leaderboard against the whole world. There'll be leaderboards against peers. So if you got an office pool and you want to pick, and you can do the whole season. You could do a month, you could do a week, like, you're just betting against other people. So we have the pretend game version now, and then we are going to deploy a paid version in the near future as the licensings roll in. So that's basically what we're launching.
So will you actually, when you get the licenses, will you actually be rolling out a true betting feature?
The way that space is determined, sports book or straight gambling, is if there's if there's a horse race or two teams playing, you say, I believe this one's going to win or that one's going to win, right? With polymarket, what you're doing is you're saying half the people you make it binary. Half the people say the Yankees are going to win, half the people say the Red Sox are going to win. Whoever loses needs to give their money to the winning side. So it's very polarity. We're not doing any of that. Closer to daily fantasy sports, what you're doing is it's a game of skill and knowledge. And so I liken it to, imagine everybody's going to enter a spelling bee, and they're each going to pay an entry fee into that spelling bee. And as you go through the spelling bee and people get eliminated, you end up getting the final one, two, or three, and they become the winners. But it is their skill and knowledge of the game that is what sets them apart. So it's not based on the outcome of how the movie did. It's based on your ability to predict what these things all might do with this salary cap budget. So if you start out with $1 million budget and I end up with 10 million, but you end up with 30 million, you are, the winner. And so it's called knowledge based rather than traditional betting, which you don't need any knowledge. You just go put money down on the Yankees or the Red Sox.
Very interesting. So I imagine that'll be kind of like transaction fee based, total dollars that go into that people kind of bet against one another. You take a transaction fee on the pool.
You're more like the house managing the money and managing the software to make it all possible. And so you charge a fee for, I'm going to build the app, I'm going to set up the game, I'll set up the rules, I'll set up everything, I'll create the whole ecosystem, and all of that goes into a bucket. And you're saying either people pay an entry fee to so you have to do it state by state. Some states are, you have to pay an entry fee, and that's flat, and others that you can charge a percentage of what's on the table. And so it depends on the state. It's state by state.
Now, taking a step back to kind of the core business, selling the actual MoviePass, is that still in place? How many people are signed up for that? And can you turn a profit on that alone, or do you really need these other services to drive that?
It's still in place. It is profitable, but in my opinion, you need something to help it scale and get to much bigger numbers. And if you can't really have a secondary revenue stream, you run into challenges. Like I said, subscription is a scale game. And so in order to reach really big scale, you need that offset. And if you are not in the theater business and you don't have an 80% margin product that you can offset it with, that you don't care they pay for the ticket or not. Matter of fact, you'd probably let them come in for free if you didn't have the studio to answer for. So you need something to get up to these big numbers. And that's kind of the name of the game if you're going to not be a small player and you want to be a global player. The advantage is if you can get something like that, nothing prevents MoviePass from being available to every theater in the world, right? So an AMC is never going to leave its lane. A Regal's not going to leave its lane, but you can then scale up and get bigger. But if you don't have an offset, because you don't have the same wholesale pricing, you don't have the offset, you run into a problem. So that's the math of it all.
Who is your core user today? What do they look like? How many movies are they going to each month?
It's seasonal, so I'm going to give you a rounded answer. High season, your summer and your Christmas or fall, you're averaging 2 times a month. Your off season, you average about 1.5 times, 1 to 1.5. So it goes in like a wave pattern. It's not just straight. There's about 5% of people that are there all the time, no matter what. Yeah. I'm one of those people. I see about 3 movies a week. So I'm very high frequency. So that's in the average person, 75% are under the age of 35. There's 50% that's on the coast, and the middle of the country makes up around the other 50%. The average age male is 26, average age female is 24, and 75% are under the age of 30.
Got it. So, in terms of where you're going from here, you're currently raising capital for the business. Where is this capital going to be invested? And when you think about where this business is in 2 to 3 years, where would you like to see it?
So the great thing about the new direction that we're heading in is the ARPU, and for those who don't know, ARPU is average revenue per user. So in subscription businesses, it's around $100, but in fantasy sports, it's closer to $1,000 per person. So the revenue's around 10x, and the profit margins are much higher because we don't bring in the money and then it's got to go out to pay theaters. So we see that kind of as our, iPhone moment, where you really are going deeper into the relationship with your customers, but offering something that's stickier, it's more mobile, it's more, it just has so much more advantages. So we see that as really the future of the company. The legacy product isn't going anywhere, but it actually allows us to grow both together. Think of it how when Apple went into the iPhone, the number of phone devices increased the number of computers that people bought.
Mm.
And so it created an ecosystem. So you can imagine as we get more into a fantasy prediction market, you're going to also be able to offer more subscriptions around the world. And now you've got a product that can offset that. So that's how we see it. That's how we kind of, strap the two together to support each other, where you're building a bigger ecosystem.
So, you really want to invest in kind of building out this gaming platform for the movie industry and be a leader in that space. Um,
100%.
Something we haven't hit on yet that I think is certainly worth the conversation is, you stepped back into this because, hey, why not take this shot? You have this brand that has all of this, brand equity. But I think there's another thing here that I think is fascinating is you seem like if there's someone who's going to do this, it's you. You have a love of movies. You're at the movies 3 times a week. I would love to know a little bit more about your background and your passion for movies.
So I came out of the entertainment industry. I was an executive at Miramax. I was an executive at Sony. I ran Focus, what is now called Focus Features, for a bit. So I was there with the original founding team. And so and before that, I was in the music industry and largely was doing soundtracks. So soundtracks kind of led me in. I did The Crow, I did Train Spotting, I did Bad Boys with Will and Martin, I did Scream. So I had a lot of great films under my belt. And then I launched a film festival called Urban World, which is still around to this day. And we then saw subscription being this really viable part of businesses. And we had a community in Urban World, and the simple idea was, let's take this community, turn them into subscribers, and then that will help people see more movies. And it worked. Our original thought wasn't to build Netflix for movie theaters, but as it evolved, we realized that's what we were doing, and we needed to focus on a much bigger market. And so you're right. I love movies. I tell people all the time, I happen to have the best job in the world. I literally just came back from a screening just a few minutes ago. And so it's like I don't work at all. I just get to play for a living, but we play hard. But it's great. Some people come into this business because they think they can make money at it, and some people do it because they love storytelling and the impact that movies can have on people. And I would say I'm in that latter category.
Well, I give you a lot of respect for taking on this revival and for being committed to something you're so passionate about. I'm sure there are investors out there who are kind of on the line because of all of the baggage that has come with this company. But for those who are kind of on that line, what's your final pitch to them? What do you want them to know? I'll give you the last word here.
Yeah, I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize is movie going is the number one out of home entertainment activity in the world. People go to the movies more than they go, 10 times more than all sporting events combined. There's a familiar statistic. So if you take one major motion picture opening weekend, something that breaks 100 million, do you know that more people went to see that movie in 4 days than who attended all the NFL games combined? 4 days on one movie. And that's the thing a lot of people don't understand about it. We're really focused right now on devices and what's on your phone, and those numbers are massive, right? They're just billions of views. But people need and want real world events, and they want to go to things. And why do you think Taylor Swift is now doing listening parties? Why do you think Demon Slayer is opening as the highest grossing animation film in history? Why does China have Ni Zhao 2, the second highest grossing film now of all times? Movies are the king of the hill that everything emulates. TVs, TV screens outpaced movie theater screens in 1950. So this whole conversation about cinema and is it dead and people not going, we had more screens in 1950. So if that was the case, and quite often Netflix is making an argument that we're better than cinema, we put the movie theater in your pocket. But I push back on that. Why then is 60% of all ticket sales today premium format, IMAX, when you look at the Christopher Nolans of the world? And I think it's really important, and I tell people always take this test. I'll do this with your listeners for a moment. So I want you to think about 10 movie directors. Just, can you name 10 movie directors? And go through your head and name some of the ones, and Christopher Nolan, Spike Lee, Ryan Coogler, Martin Scorsese, Woody Allen, whatever. Name 10. Now I want you to name 10 streaming directors. And you'll find it's much harder to do because it's not the same thing and it's not the same experience. So I am long on cinema, and I'm also long on delivering now an engagement tool that we saw. FanDuel and DraftKings in 5 years are both worth $4 billion each. FanDuel and DraftKings in the US alone generate $8 billion, and the US box office is only $11 billion. But think, people are watching more movies and going to more games than that. So there's a big there, and there's a very high ARPU. And so when you see those things, you have a recipe for success.
If you liked what you heard on the show today, you can check out their rating at kingscrowd.com. You can also invest on WeFunder right now. And as always, if you like what you heard on the show today, please like, subscribe, and share our podcast wherever you listen so more investors like you can find us. Hit that button right now, please. Thanks for tuning in,